I have the pleasure today of being joined by Matthew Meszaros. Now, Matthew is the founder and CEO of Project Ohm. Matthew, so great to see you. Thanks for making time to catch up with me.
Good morning, Des. How are you this morning? Thank you
I,
for inviting me for this opportunity.
yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate it, mate. Doing famously on this wonderful day, although lamenting the fact that it's freezing cold here in Sydney, but I suspect it's a bit warmer there in Perth. So for our audience dialing in, just to give you a quick summary of what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to be talking about Matthew and his role as founder and CEO of Project Ohm. We're going to be talking about what Project Ohm is. We're going to be talking about his participation in BeerOps 2025's event in Perth, the second in the annual series for this year, and a whole range of exciting things around what he's doing with the AI for Good project and working with the United Nations and their sustainable development goals and much more. Matthew, I wonder if you could maybe just kick us off firstly with a bit of a 30,000 foot overview of what Project Ohm is. I know it's an initiative that was born in Western Australia and that you saw a bunch of opportunities around, I guess, energy generation specific to high performance computing and AI. Walk us through kind of what it is and where it came from, if you could, and then kind of what the key focus and directives are.
Absolutely. So Project Ohm is addressing the massive bottleneck about how do we power AI computing. We've seen huge announcements that have occurred in the United States about new data center projects. If those data center projects were to be completed, they would consume 97% of energy created in the US.
Wow.
So we're talking about 37 or requirement for 37 new nuclear power plants to power that amount of computing. To date, I'm not aware of a shovel hitting the ground in relation to building those new power plants. So we really need to address, a single data center or AI data center in the United States is equal to the power draw of 280,000 homes, or the equivalent of carbon emissions of 1.3 million New York London flights.
That's
It's
just
incredible,
mind-boggling.
incredible problem that we're addressing. And Project Ohm is looking at, I guess, our progress about renewables. In Western Australia, we have over 1.4 terawatt hours of curtailed or wasted renewable energy in our system. And that is because it is being produced at a time of day or a place where it can't be used. So we're tying this wasted renewable energy to the problem, how do we power AI compute going forward?
That's amazing. It reminds me of sort of the emergence and surge in the build out of the sort of the Bitcoin compute farms that were used for either creating new hashes to create the tokens or to validate and process the transactions. And that, people were putting them into things like old hydro stations where there was excess power and more water, or they were looking desperately for things like geothermal. And then eventually they started putting them into developed areas unless they got kicked out of nations the way they did in China, for example. And then you found them going to large, particularly in America, large areas where, as you said, there's an excess of power being generated, and those generators were looking for ways for people to take that up, particularly during the evenings when people are asleep. Um, when we think about the issue itself, I wonder if you could just walk us through sort of some of the key points around kind of how you're going to address that. I mean, obviously, you're looking for consumption of energy that's already being generated through potentially fossil fuels and then essentially just left on the floor. But I understand that there's a range of activity, particularly the economic investment in green energy, if we like. Give us a breakdown of both of those sides of the coin, if you can.
Absolutely. And I think you had a hugely valid point when you were talking about the emergence of crypto and the movement of chasing cheap energy, and the idea of building into containerized nodes, which is exactly our approach. So it's a ruggedized AI node and it's placed exactly next to a renewable energy site. Then there's an algorithm that aligns the renewable energy or the green electrons, which are cheap and are abundant, to AI workloads. So that way we can achieve the lowest cost of energy. In fact, we're achieving around a 60% average reduction in energy costs versus infrastructure placed in a large data center.
Amazing. It's almost like the whole the large scale version of edge computing, isn't it? Because when we think about some of the project successes we've seen so far, which seem to me to mirror a lot of what you're doing for the AI space, we had people like Google containerizing data centers and putting them into the basements of buildings. So they had TV stations, radio stations, and newspapers where they were putting that compute in their buildings to be as far close as possible to the source of the data rather than trying to long haul it across telecoms environments. And as you said, when we saw the emergence of Bitcoin, people containerized or at least built racks of stuff that they could prefabricate and ship into sites and put the compute as close as possible to where the power was. On the other side, the flip coin, I guess, in one side, you're looking to put that infrastructure where the power already is. Tell us a little bit more about kind of what you see long term with regard to generative generation of power in spaces where maybe it isn't being produced in the current methods. You mentioned, investments that people are potentially talking about at brochure level with, small reactors, which I think is sort of hitting the news. But there is investment being made in researching on, the potential emergence of nuclear energy again, which many people think is very good clean energy. But there's already activity with wind and solar and hydro and so forth. Where does that play into kind of what you're doing? Will you be looking to take some of the infrastructure not only to where there's existing large power generation with fossil fuels, but also some of those greener energy spaces?
Absolutely. Look, the origination of Project Home is really, I guess, tied to what is happening in our energy grid. And, Australia has the highest adoption rate of domestic rooftop solar. And that's a fantastic commitment to renewables, but it's also created a problem in our grid. And that is that these solar feeds are accumulating in our substations. These are the endpoints of our network, and the accumulation of these solar feeds is getting to a level where the AEMO, which is the Australian Energy Market Operator, requested emergency powers in December to be able to send a voltage signal down the line to trip your domestic inverter. So we have accumulation of renewable power that is occurring right down in our substations. We have solar farms that are curtailing their production because of negative pricing that's occurring in our system. That's because renewable energy is intermittent. It's from solar. When the sun shines, we're creating solar. When the wind blows, we're creating wind energy. But it's not tied to demand. And that disconnect between the supply of renewable energy and demand is the opportunity that we see. So there's a huge number of sites down to our substations, down to renewable farms, to renewable projects in our regions. We've looked at the Ord River Hydro, which was originally designed to provide power to the Argyle Diamond Mine, which closed in 2020. They're now down to one turbine because they're currently supplying the township of Kununurra, and the demand is not there. So there's opportunities for us to put these AI or distributed AI compute facilities around our network, not just in Australia, but all around the world. Renewable energy is being curtailed, it's being wasted, and we see that as an opportunity.
Yeah, I imagine folk like Infigen Energy, who I think are still the world's largest wholesaler of wind energy and so forth around the world, who are based here in Australia, in fact, launched in Sydney. I was involved in establishing their IT infrastructure and data centers. I imagine they're very keen to hear from you to have a conversation about how you can uptake all that energy they're producing that, as you said, isn't probably going all into the grid. There's also, I imagine, an interesting challenge where we're seeing, sort of the electric vehicle bubble come through the process where they are trying to get power at the edge of the grid where cars are distributed, either at homes or in the street in essentially top-up centers, which act like petrol stations for EVs. And you're going to sort of either parts of those or potentially directly at the source. And so in many ways, I imagine they see you as a competitor in some ways that they want the power at the edge of the grid and you're picking up at the heart of the grid. Um, I imagine there's going to be an interesting conversation around how you kind of balance that for them. And I can see a scenario where your central hubs eventually then become edge of the grid hubs where you move from where you can get some quick gains in the power generation, but you can also then go and work with existing data center spaces where there's some room and already the network and power infrastructure. Is that part of the mid to long term juggle, I imagine, for you to contemplate?
We're really, I guess, we're the alternative to centralized data centers, and I guess, a large data center in terms of a project can take between 2 to 5 years to plan,
Right.
and the majority of that time frame can be how do we get power to the facility. Currently, our model is we bring energy to data centers. Our model is to take data centers or compute to the energy source because of the scale of which each node, we know that the power is available. We know the network connectivity is there. The solution is plug and play. In relation to other participants in the grid that you mentioned, in relation to electrical vehicle chargers and batteries, if we look at solar, for example, on our grid, it looks like a bell curve. As the sun arises, the energy increases, the output increases. As it recedes, of course, we see the tail end of the curve. A battery looks like a rectangle. If you place a rectangle within that bell curve, you see that the rectangle, the battery, does not solve the entire problem. So we work very cooperatively and productively with other chargers. Now, electrical vehicle charging is really, again, intermittent. We don't know when you pull over and when you'll be connecting, but the impact of that charging does have fluctuations through the grid. What we are providing is a grid stabilizing force because we're reacting as energy or cheap energy is available, and we're reducing when we have these demand surges and, of course, energy cost surges. So we duck out of those cost surges, we duck out of the high fossil fuel generation points, and we optimize towards a green outcome.
I like it. It reminds me of back in the 80s when we worked with people like AOL and we designed content delivery networks. We were actually putting whole racks of infrastructure on blocks of cement out in the field, just like telecom infrastructure for twisted pair cable going to PSDN lines in people's houses and offices. We ended up putting the actual compute out in the field to capture the content and then feed it to people who are dialing in via broadband or dial-up modem. I imagine there's a scenario at some point that once you solve the problem at the big end of town where you're at the power generation, there is always going to be a demand for a period of time for the EVs, and that power will be delivered to those charging points. If it's not being consumed, it seems to me like there's a great opportunity to grab that power when it's not being used to power a car, etc. What are your thoughts around the inverse challenge where, as you said, there's a challenge when you build a data center, you've then got to run infrastructure into it, which is, power and water and of course telecoms. Placing the compute at the power generation side of things is great because you get the energy. But what sort of challenges do you then run into with regard to then having to run the telecoms in there so that you can then feed, you know, petabytes of data into those data centers you've got at the power generation, so you've got the actual compute, but people want to then push in enormous amounts of data into that to be able to then process and train those language models? Or is it the case you take in a pre-trained language model into that when you put it into there where the generation is? How does that sort of model work?
Absolutely. So our model is a GPU as a service. So we're selling compute time. Now, in relation to, I guess the origination of the concept is to look at these substations, and Western Power in Western Australia is the local grid operator. Grid operators have their own fibre networks right across Australia. So every substation around Australia is connected by the grid operator's fibre. So we have the opportunity to connect into that fibre network as we have the opportunity to connect directly at that power source and intercept that curtailed renewable energy as well. So the model works really well, plug and play, around addressing the problem that we identified, and we see more or new projects and looking at more remote sites. We've looked at opportunities with Project Kuiper, which is the Amazon LEO satellite network, and the throughputs that are indicated from that network could be suitable for us to look at more remote locations, such as, say, the Ord River Hydro.
That's exciting. I imagine folk like Equinix are very keen to chat to you as well with regard to that networking element, because I don't imagine you'd want to become a telco, a carrier, or a broadband platform for the network, but you'd love to have a network partner who can then deal with that endpoint. I wonder if we could maybe just get a quick sort of outline of your, again, 30,000 foot view of sort of your background and your career path and what actually led you to come to this point where you saw this need in the market and realized it was an exciting opportunity. I mean, there's some pretty obvious ones in hindsight when we look back now and goes, wow, that makes sense. But it takes someone like yourself to look at it and realize there's an opportunity there and to be able to put a business case and a business model together and go and build that. What was your career path sort of leading up to that that sort of gave you the background and the skills and experience and the knowledge to sort of look at it and go, wow, I need to solve this problem?
Sure. Well, look, I started my career in telecommunications. So I worked with a large ISP here in Perth. I moved to Sydney. I worked for NTT, a large international submarine or international telecommunications carrier. I then worked with the Macquarie Technology Group, who built one of the first data centers here in Australia. So I gained a lot of experience around networks and infrastructure. I then consulted in and around technology projects for over 20 years before returning to Western Australia in 2019. When we returned to Western Australia, it was just prior to COVID. Got
Oh, wow.
a lot of time for introspection there. Um, I put a large solar array on our home, and I've always been a solar nerd, and I looked at the generation of power that we were producing, and of course the usage or that we were, and the excess that we were producing. At the same time, I was reading articles in the newspaper and very, very strong articles identifying that the high adoption rate, we've had the highest adoption rate in the world of domestic rooftop solar, was becoming a problem. And now, at the same time in 2021, we had the chat, the first instance of chat GPT and the advent of broad scale AI, consumer AI. Now, not jumping on the bandwagon of AI but AI was very useful in the equation because it is workload driven. And that is a change from traditional compute that we had, which was 24/7 sort of supply of web hosting or supply of mail serving. The nature of that, the other question about AI is its huge power use and the density of its power use. Putting those concepts together, we arrived at AI or small compute AI or AI footprints or nodes could be a solution to picking up this excess renewable power that was occurring in our grid. It could be a grid stabilizing force because compute is infinitely controllable in regards to its power use. It can be controlled in microseconds in regard to its power use. And that satisfies a lot of the criteria of the market mechanisms for being able to shed load. So they're beyond providing a compute solution to help Australia's sovereign AI future. We're also providing a mechanism to help stabilize our grid and work within energy markets.
Yeah, in many ways, we mentioned Bitcoin and so forth and blockchains in general, but whether it's Bitcoin, Bitcoin Classic, Bitcoin USD, Ethereum, Tesla, there's a bunch of those that have already proven that model works in almost every aspect you're describing there with regard to AI. And that plays very nicely into kind of another topic I'd like to just quickly touch on. And that is that, and congratulations, by the way, you actively participate in United Nations AI for Good. I think they describe it as what do they call it? An impact initiative using artificial intelligence to solve some of the problems that they focused on, and particularly the sustainable development projects they've got. I wonder if you can maybe firstly just give us a 30,000 foot overview of your participation in AI for Good. And I know I have it on good authority at least, and I wonder if you can confirm, but you've won the local competition, and you're now about to go and represent Australia in the world. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. So we were lucky enough to win the local competition, which was provided by Innovate Australia. Innovate Australia brought AI to good to Australia for the first time, and it was hosted here in Perth, which was obviously fortunate for us. Um, AI for good. It's a global initiative. It's looking for solutions that are going to change the world, and it's looking for solutions that achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. These are big challenges for the world around how do we maintain a path to a climate neutral future, and how do we enable or enable a wider circle to participate in an economic future, technological future. So our platform was successful in for the Australian competition. We'll be going to Geneva on the 8th of July. We will be competing against 9 other solutions, which are all proposing very important initiatives across digital healthcare and AI, agriculture, and serving the needs of developing countries. I guess our position is that if we can't solve how do we power AI sustainably, then we haven't developed a platform to serve any other or create a future for other sustainable development goals.
Yeah, well, and that underpins, I guess, the 17 core goals that the United Nations drives with regard to the sustainable development goals. And AI plays nicely into all of them. I actually had the opportunity to be at Orlando recently with Click, the AI and data and business intelligence platform company, and interviewed Julie Kay, who's the executive director, and person who heads up their click.org project, and they donate their software and skills and experience, tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars capability to very similar things using technology and AI to solve it. And the 17 SDNs inside the UN underpin all that as well. And it was interesting to hear her talk about exactly the same things you're talking about, which is how do we use technology to solve real world human problems where, simple things like getting food and water to the right people at the right time in the right way can save lives, versus medium to long-term goals, which I think fall into a lot of what you're doing with the focus on putting AI where power is to then make smarter use of existing infrastructure and resources we've got. So it seems like an interesting balance of running like a hackathon style competition to solve here and now problems with technology got, as well as longer term prospects that the likes of the United Nations 17 SDGs are all built around. And you're going to be presenting at BeerOps in Perth in, I think it's about a week or so. It's the 1st of July, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the 1st of July, the second event for the BeerOps 2025 event series. There's 4 of them this year. And BeerOps, of course, as our audience probably knows, is Australia's largest tech networking event. They have 4 events. Brisbane's just been run, Perth's coming up, which you'll be at, and then Melbourne and Sydney will be running later in the year. Um, Tell us a little bit about, without giving away too much, we don't want to give away all the secrets, but give us some highlights of kind of what sorts of things you'll be sharing at the event, because I understand you're going to be doing a talk on not only just what you're doing with AI for good, but of course Project Ohm and other things as well.
Absolutely. Look, this will be my 4th time to attend a BeerOps event, and they've been fantastic. They have such energy, and they've always had such great participation. So we're really, really excited to be invited to get up on stage. A little nervous to get up on stage, but we will be presenting our pitch for Geneva at the BeerOps event. It's a great staging opportunity for us to test audience our presentation and hopefully build up some momentum to take us on to Geneva. And we're hoping that this is going to be a successful event for not just Project Ohm, but Australia and Australia's opportunity to sell or showcase its technology, our initiatives for promoting a sustainable future for AI.
Yeah, I had the
So
pleasure of interviewing your associate Peter Kapshak, the chairman in Innovate Australia, and he was outlining kind of what they're bringing to the party as well as far as BeerOps is concerned, and just some fascinating topics that he's going to be talking about in a panel, I believe. With what you just outlined in mind, why do you think events, and you've touched on a few of those, but why do you think events like BeerOps, as Australia's largest tech networking event, are so important for the likes of innovation in areas such as Perth? What are some of the big things that you see these types of events bringing to the table? You've mentioned sort of the ability to test run your own pitch and presentation, but I'm sure you've got a long list of things that you can see that the BeerOps makes possible as an event series, and particularly the one locally in Perth, with regard to some of the networking and opportunities and introductions and the panels and so forth.
Absolutely. Look, the community that BeerOps brings together, a huge number of industry professionals to come together to share their knowledge, to share their challenges, to talk about the projects that they're working on. It gives you a depth of the industry. Sometimes you're working on your own solution and you can feel lonely. But when you're in a room with thousands of people and they're all working on similar solutions, or not similar solutions, but working in areas of technology that circumspect where you are working, the knowledge share, the opportunity to network and to create and bridge new opportunities is fantastic.
Yeah, there really is no substitute for those in-person things, and coming out of the COVID era, we're all very excited to be together again, as to before the lockdowns. But as you said, there is no substitute for that sort of opportunity to be around birds of a feather, peers. One of the great things I love about BeerOps, just to touch on it, is for our audience who we'd really like, and wherever you see this video, by the way, we will have links, not only where you can learn more about what AI for Good is all about and what Matthew's working on, and certainly Innovate Australia and Project Ohm, but also BeerOps, the event series, and the dates and locations. And we would like you to go and learn more about that via those links wherever you see this video, and register early if there's an event coming up near you, and there's one coming up in Perth soon. But I don't think there's any substitute for that sort of in-person conversation, being able to stand in front of you, chat to you, share some ideas. And as you said, if you've got a bunch of people who are, peers in many ways, but also birds of a feather with different backgrounds, different career paths, different industries, but similar interests, you can have some amazing conversations. And I think one of the things I really love about BeerOps, just to touch on it, is just the inclusivity. And I don't just mean that from the traditional DEI sort of diversity, equity, and inclusivity, but I also mean from, like, younger people talking to older people, more experienced professionals like yourself talking to new entrants to the job market, or uni students looking to get started out, and you can sort of share those conversations, and also, not just build a network, but build that sort of knowledge share, which sometimes we don't often have the time to pay it forward and share on, which I think is exciting. How do you best prepare for these sorts of events? I know you've been to many of these, you keynote to them, you speak at them, you'll be presenting at BeerOps in Perth in a week's time. For attendees coming along prior to the event, how should they best prepare to come to this event and get the maximum value out of it? Because this, as you said, there's going to be an enormous room full of exciting people. They're all going to be buzzing around with a bite to eat and a drink in hand, and a conversation. But what sort of thoughts do you have around how to best get the most out of this event? How to prepare for it? What sort of planning should they do? What sort of homework should they do so that when they turn up on the night, they're going to be well and truly prepared to get the maximum bang out of this thing?
Absolutely. Look, I guess the nature of I guess the individuals that often tend to end up in a technology career, they're intellectuals, but they may not socially be as capable as a wider audience. So the challenge for many is, how do I interact in a social setting? So I guess it's really focusing on sort of what are the challenges that I am facing in my work, and be prepared to engage with somebody that you haven't met previously. And the simplest form of introduction is really to share your workday and the challenges that you face, and you'll find that the individual will reciprocate, and suddenly you'll be in an engaging conversation. You'll have made a new contact, and you'll maybe progress some of the bottlenecks that you're facing in your own work field. So be open, be prepared in terms of thinking of conversational topics to engage, and always remember to take away, and I guess, or the conversation, so that you can make a LinkedIn connection. You can use the scanner to make that connection, but follow it up with a email or a message, and you can recap the conversation that you had with that individual. You can pick up the conversation, you can continue it, and can continue that professional connection, which will be, I'm sure, invaluable to your career going forward.
That's some great advice. Yeah, if I summarize that, it's almost a case of, turn up with a purpose, be very clear about what you want to get out of the event, be very clear about how you can engage with people on the night itself, and then be very clear about how you follow up. And as you said, make sure you've got the quick response or QR code scan element of your LinkedIn app on your phone open and invite people to connect or network. If they don't be offended. Not everybody wants to do that. Some people are very careful about who they connect with, but at the same time, you can easily look them up and ask for their permission to follow them on various things. It's just as valid in my mind to follow someone on LinkedIn without being creepy and just keep up to date with the news announcements and new blogs and so forth, as it is to ask for a connection invite. And I think a lot of people may be more happy with that to start out with, and then you can do likes and comments and reshares of some of their content they're doing to build that rapport and trust and relationship in such a time that makes sense to then reach out and connect. Matthew, what's the best way for folk to keep across your own updates and so forth? I know you do a lot of work, you do a lot of speaking, a lot of events, as we've been talking about today. What's your preferred way, or what's the best way for folk to sort of keep up to date with what you're doing, not just with Project Ohm and your sort of, day-to-day activities of that project and your role as founder and CEO of Project Ohm, but also AI for Good and the overall global summit and your upcoming competition? What's the best way, or how should people keep up to date and follow you and your updates and news?
Absolutely. We keep a very active LinkedIn page with regard to all of our announcements, individuals that are joining Project Ohm, where we're at with regard to AI for Good. We'll be documenting our journey to Geneva. We'll be documenting hopefully our success through the program. But I also haven't mentioned our progress with University of Western Australia, where we're working on our pilot project. So we'll be providing some updates on that very shortly. So lots of exciting things happening. Please follow us at Project Ohm on LinkedIn, as well. We'll provide updates on our website as well.
Matthew Meszaros, it's been amazing to get to know you and your role as founder and CEO of Project Ohm, to learn more about what you're doing, not just with Project Ohm, which is described as a project to aim on sustainable AI computing and decentralization, as well as AI for Good, the global summit, which I believe is coming up from the 8th to the 11th of July. So you'll be getting on a plane very soon, I imagine, going to Geneva. We'll look forward to hopefully having you back to have a conversation around post BeerOps Perth 2025 on the 1st of July, and also once we learn how you go with the event in Geneva with AI for Good with the United Nations. And congratulations again on all the success you've had with both Project Ohm and AI for Good with the UN. And in the meantime, safe travels. Really appreciate you making time to catch up. And we'll look forward to having you back on the show again soon.
Thanks, Des. Really appreciate the opportunity to have the chat.
Absolute pleasure. And again, just folks thanks for tuning in. We will, wherever you have seen this video, we will, whether it's on digital and social platforms, etc., we will have links to all the things we mentioned, whether it's Matthew's LinkedIn profile, whether it's Project Ohm on its LinkedIn profile itself, or the company page. We'll certainly have information about AI for Good. And more importantly, we'll have details around where BeerOps is near you on the dates and times. Make sure you visit the BeerOps website, have a look at the dates, and register as soon as possible. I understand from Stephen Wallace that there's a 100% discount on the tickets currently, which of course is a bit of a joke on the fact that it's actually free. And hopefully we will see you in person at a nearby event. If you cannot make an event for BeerOps this year, don't give up your hope. You can join the conversation on digital and social platforms by following them on various social media platforms and bookmarking their website. And we'll look forward to seeing you again. But Matthew, thanks so much for your time. Safe travels again, and we will look forward to having you back again soon.
Thanks, Des. Yes.